Welcome to the Real People, Real Business Show, where we're talking with business owners who are in the trenches, everyday people who are working hard and have relevant and inspiring stories that you can relate to. Everyone we speak to is actively building and growing their business and is here to share their experiences, lessons, wisdom, and guidance so you can be inspired to take action towards your own goals. Today, I am so excited to welcome my longtime friend, Robin Miller. She runs a multidisciplinary design studio who works with clients to create an immersive brand experience so they can express their passion in a way that's just right for them. Welcome to the show, Robin, and thanks so much for taking the time to share your story today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I'm excited. This is my first ever podcast.
Oh, awesome. Well, I can't wait to get into it with you. So let me ask you, how did you get to where you are right now? Tell us your story.
Okay, stories. I like stories. I'm going to start from now and then go backwards instead of the other way around.
Oh, you're a rebel.
So I have a little design studio called Back 40 Studio, and this sort of came about in the last year. And it was pretty much a year from now when a girlfriend and I were sitting down together and having a beer. And we were both chatting about our situations, and we realized we were both in the same spot. We had just kind of left a design firm and we're debating. You were like, oh, do we go and find another job at a design firm or do we do the freelance thing? And she, being a designer as well, was like, well, I have this idea. I've been kicking this idea for a business around in my head called Back 40, blah, blah, blah. And so we started talking, and by the time we'd finished our second beer, we were like, let's go into business. So that's how this current business came about. And it, over the last year, it's changed drastically because she actually ended up getting headhunted like 2 months into us going into business. So I kind of had a crisis of faith last year and was like, oh my God, do I keep doing this? But I'm still here. So obviously I did. Then to step back beyond that, my background is in design. So I've been working for years in either graphic design studios or with apparel design. So kind of flipping back and forth between the two. And then prior to getting into design, I spent a decade working in the film industry as a GRIP, which is lighting and camera support. And that's an odd thing to transition to. I think people were like, oh, film technician to graphic designer, that's a bit of an odd swap. But I think in the film industry, I really got a chance to see and get a really good on how to live and how to change. Design can really change what the overall outcome and the messaging is for something. And I think that's something that I really find interesting in design as well. It's how do you do a little tweak and that changes the whole conversation or the whole kind of perspective on the communication that's going out. So that's kind of a quick snapshot of where I am now and how I got here.
Yeah, and I think what's so cool about you is you have these kind of juxtaposed, that's a word, right?
Yeah.
Juxtaposed sides of you, because I've known you to be out taking welding classes.
Yeah.
And then you have this really beautiful feminine kind of approach to your design. Your designs are beautiful and almost delicate. Yeah. And so how has that kind of manifested itself in what you've ended up with?
Right. And so that's, thanks for bringing that up. That's totally a great point. And that's kind of all about what Back 40 is about, because my friend Aubrey and I are both country girls, and, we grew up, mucking around and throwing hay bales and mucking out stalls and, running around and being tomboys and kind of grubby and overall. But we both have this deep passion for art and design, and I love fashion and getting dressed up. And my favorite pair of shoes are these gray cowboy boots that I get to wear, snakeskin cowboy boots. So for a long time, it was it felt a little bit, I felt a little bit confused, I needed to be one or the other. But I think Back 40 is really that representation of no, you don't have to decide, and you don't have to pigeonhole yourself or ignore one side of who you are. You can be this multifaceted person, or and you can bring that into your branding and your company too, right? So that's what we really want to get into, is looking at all the little bits that make you unique.
I love that because I come from the same kind of background where well, I wasn't a country girl, but I grew up in the IT industry, which is very, very masculine, very male dominated, very like, analytical and left brain, right? Is
Yeah.
left brain the analytical brain? Yeah, left brain.
I still have to do this to figure out left, so I'm maybe not the best person to talk to.
Yeah. So whatever that is.
Yeah.
And then try, coming out of that, now I work almost entirely with women, not necessarily by choice, but just that's the way it's kind of panned out. And I have this desire to bring more femininity, more of my feminine energy
Yeah.
into the work that I do. And it was always kind of like you have to choose.
Yeah.
But now there's this knowledge I have that we get to be a little bit of everything, right?
And I think, like from the time that I've known you, you've always been someone that I've admired as far as like being able to balance and having that really great analytical side, but also being such a kind human and really bringing that like empathetic feminine side of stuff. So sorry, what you had a question there, but
Well, I don't know that there was we were
yeah,
just having a conversation, but
yeah,
just that why did we grow up thinking we need to pigeonhole ourselves? It's almost like
exactly.
in your 40s you finally realize that you can be a little bit of both, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think there's such a liberation to finally settling into that, and I think it comes up like in the past podcasts that I've been listening to, and some of your questions and a lot of the answers of as to what like when you ask about what people see happening in the business world, and there's all these kind of stereotypical like these preset packages or like this is the way this is do X, Y, and Z and you're going to get there, and it's totally ignoring self-reflection and like looking within and acknowledging who you are and what you need, and just kind of trying to be like and just always looking to other people for kind of confirmation or guidance on who you should be, whereas you should be, it's the other way around. You need to be looking internally for that. And I think it's the same for business, right? You need to look internally to find the right answers and the right fit for what you're going to be doing.
100%. And if you don't, you're not going to succeed because you're going to have this business that you're not really part of, and there's friction and it's fragmented and you don't put the energy in and what have you. So tell me a little bit about how that sort of manifests itself in the way that you work with your clients.
Right. So I like to go through, I've pulled from a bunch of different spots, and it sort of started with me thinking about, what I learned while working in film and that whole like watching people craft narratives and stories, and then looking at how also, just even in your life that someone else brought it up, it's like you're often, the sum of the 5 closest people that you're surround yourself with. And that's sort of a story that you're crafting for yourself with like choosing who you're surrounding yourself with or choosing what you're going to tell other people. And so I started to pull in a really story-based process that I like to work with my clients through. And we go through kind of a like where a beginning, a middle, and an end. Where did you come from? Where are you right now? And where are you looking to go for and go towards? And just crafting it a bit like a story like that helps people go through this process of looking internally and analyzing their business, and then pulling out those sort of key essential pieces that are actually, they're like, oh, this is actually really valuable from my past. And I had no idea that this little thing that I did growing up was actually is such a huge part into why I do things I do now. And then I also like to bring in, instead of like designers often have this thing of creating a persona or an ideal client for their customers, or you'll say, okay, this business, your ideal customer is going to be 24 to 36. They're going to have this income and they're going to do this. That just doesn't sit right with me, and it doesn't, it's such an abstract thing that people then have. It just doesn't go anywhere. And the whole intention of creating that persona for a business is to help you understand who you're communicating to. So I work with my clients to create archetypes around their own brand persona, and then around who they want to be serving. And then you look for alignment between these two archetypes. And by using archetypes, it's focusing more on values. It's focusing more on behavior patterns. It's almost like looking at what are some of your habitual actions that you want to support, or, and that side of stuff, versus just tacking a label and saying, oh, you're a middle income person or that wants to buy this magazine. And it brings more connection into what you're doing. So those are kind of like two of the really big things that I work with clients around creating their story. And then that from there, that's what we then build, layer on top of that, and put the visuals on to represent that.
And I imagine that having those sort of psychographics nailed for your clients is part of your creative process, right? It helps in your creative process.
Exactly. Yeah. So I like to focus mostly on branding, and as part of that creative process, a huge part of that is actually sort of this research and discovery phase. And I like to take a little bit longer with my clients, because often in going through this, it's like going through a process of change, and you sometimes need some downtime to ponder and like let yourself adjust. And if you're working, and say if I'm working with an organization and there's lots of people involved in the process, again, there's going to be people that are they're going to move at different different speeds, and they're going to want different times of self-reflection or reflection as to what is important and what's happening during this process of, kind of restoring their organization. So I'd like to go a little bit slowly and allow people, like having personal change, a little bit of self-reflection. It just builds in breathing room, and it kind of results in like this better end result.
This is super interesting to me, because I have a lot of clients who are creatives, and who are constantly in this sort of friction, because they've got clients who want their stuff in a certain timeline, but you can't force the creative process. And my clients who do like sort of high-end creative work, they are people who need the time to let the creativity percolate, right? So I think it's super interesting that you have approached this from a very realistic perspective, and you build into your process the ability for that integration to happen.
Yeah, and exactly. It's important not only for my clients to sort of have the space to breathe and reflect around what they're changing and where they want to go, but it's also something, and you talked about it in your past podcasts, and I loved hearing it come up, building in that breathing room for myself in my creative process, because some days it's like that and I can just get into the flow, and then other times it's like, whoa, this is going to take me a little while. And I'm getting better at like creating the habits and the structures in my life that allow me to kind of find that creative flow state a little bit faster. But still, it's not a guarantee. So, I need to be able to walk away and go think about it while I do dishes or go for a run or something like that. And if I haven't built that into my process, then it just ends up with this stressful situation, not only for me, but for my client.
So tell me a little bit more about that. What have you, because I think a lot of people would be really interested in this. What have you built into your life so that you can help facilitate that creative process?
Right. And so, I've tried so many things, I've gone through the Pomodoro method and like scheduling every hour as to what I was going to do. But I've realized that, and maybe this is just like part of being a creative, I really dislike structure and schedules. So what I've tried to do is look at creating certain habits in my life that allow me to, that set me up for success whenever I decide to like, I'm like, whether it's like, oh, I wake up at 6 a.m. and I'm ready to go, or whether it's like, oh no, I need to putter around in my morning and then I can work in the afternoon. I've tried setting these habits, and they're really basic, general like life habits, you know, go to bed on time, get up at a regular hour, make sure that I am taking the time off from work to exercise, um, creating a little bit of a morning ritual around how I prep for the start of the day. So just those things outside of my business set me up for success for when I do sit down to work, and to, you know, it puts me in the right frame of mind, and it helps me be relaxed and focused on what I'm doing.
So what kind of advice can you give to other people who are in creative roles that need to find that same kind of balance? I mean, it's not like you're going to be able to tell them you have to do this, this, and this, because everybody's a little bit different, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't think I can tell anyone exactly, like I couldn't tell anyone what they needed to do. I would say that it's a very personal experience, and you need to start to recognize what things bring. You need to recognize where you work and what it feels like when you're in your ideal work state, and then start looking at what things set me up to get there. So that's going to be super personal for everybody. But you know, like I know I like certain, you know, I like certain noise levels. Like sometimes I like to go to a coffee shop for certain tasks because that background noise really helps me to focus. And then other tasks, I like it completely silent. So just recognizing, you know, like, oh, I have these tasks and this is the environment that I work best in. I do the things I need to do to get there.
And that requires you to have a lot of observation, right?
Yeah.
And to be conscious of noticing all of these things, right? And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people are just kind of, they have some gut feel, but they haven't sort of consciously watched and noticed the patterns. And so is that kind of the first step to getting to that ability to support yourself as a creative in doing the work in the best way possible?
Yeah, I think so. And you know what? Like, it it's taken me a long time to get here. It's been like 8 years of trying to figure this out. And then it's been tied really closely with, I've had a journey around mental health as well. It's something that I've had to deal with my entire life. And it wasn't until probably 4 years ago that I recognized that this was something that wasn't just part of my life. It was actually something that I needed to address and to get help with and to work on. And I feel like that was the moment when I started working on that. And I'm going to be really open and honest here. I went on medication, and like for me, that was the right thing to do. But it just opened up my eyes to like, oh, there's a whole nother way of being able to see and function and observe myself and interact with the world. Like it went from me having blinders on and only being able to see about this much of my life to like it going like this. So my journey for my observation and like what you were mentioning, like being able to recognize my own habits was really directly tied with my mental health. So that, you know, that's a very personal thing. Other people will probably come at it from different points of view.
Yeah. And we all have our own journeys for sure.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
thank you for sharing that. I think that opens up the conversation for a lot of people who are kind of going through the same thing and
yeah,
who may need more support than they're getting right now.
exactly. And I think it's, you know, it's it's something that the more I talk about it, the more people I run into that have also experienced the same thing. And I like, especially as far as, you know, business owners, it's super common actually. And it's been really refreshing to have these conversations. And I don't think that it's often acknowledged. You know, we spend so much time, we're like this little bubble of one often, if you're a small business. The feedback loop is only yourself. Like, so very rarely do you have input coming in from, you know, whether it's, you know, someone telling you you've done a good job or offering constructive feedback or to help you grow, you very like, unless you make efforts to go and get those things, it's really easy to just become this little isolated little bubble of one.
Well, I think there's a lot of commentary too that where people think they need to know how to support themselves, right? And how they need to, and I don't mean that financially, I mean like they need to know how to be okay, right?
Yeah.
And oftentimes you actually need more than you can provide for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And building that and again, it comes down to recognizing that and being able to say, oh, look, I'm in a situation and I need support from elsewhere. And I think that self-observation and self-reflection is so key to being able to recognize, even if it's like going out to purchase a business tool, or it's going to set your packages, or it's on a personal mental health level, whatever it is, it's like being able to recognize where you're at and what it is that you need is so key to making the wise steps that you need.
100%. I couldn't agree with that more.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about this transition you made from film and being this very like this grip, like you're a grip. That means, you're like tough.
Yeah.
To this into design. I remember when you made that transition. I was there when you made that.
You were.
And how much it meant to you. So talk me through a little bit of, how that went for you. Like, what was it like? What were you dealing with? Tell me.
Right. Yeah. So that was a hard transition. It was exciting and it was fun, but it was also really hard. I have to say, I was thinking the other day, I was looking back and I'm like, I remember those first few months of like me kind of trying to launch into graphic design and how helpful you were to me. And like, I think you might have sent me the first article that I ever read on like value-based pricing for business. And it's something that I still refer back to to this day when I'm like feeling weird about my pricing. But yeah, so I was a grip in the film industry, and I was one of maybe at the time, half a dozen women in Vancouver that had that role. So I worked in a very male-dominated department, and I was very lucky that I had. Just let me turn off my notifications. I should have done that. That I had some super supportive crew members. So there were struggles as far as, dealing with being a woman in a male-dominated industry. But I think a lot of them were things that I often put on myself because the people that I worked with were really incredibly supportive. But I put all this pressure on myself to prove that I was hard and I could work like the men and I could carry the same things that they could carry and all that sort of thing. And that pressure, I think, kind of took the joy out of the job and wore me down. And I got to this point where I was starting to feel so ill about the thought of going to work that I just couldn't do it anymore. So I went back to school. I guess I was 29 when I went back to school, and went to Emily Carr and BCIT. And once I'd finished there, I was kind of working this bridge job of managing a production equipment rental house in the city, but I'd just moved to Squamish. So I was commuting for 3 hours a day. And it was challenging to be in a new town, trying to start a new career and working a job while still tied to my old career. And I felt like I was torn between two places and dragging a big weight behind me at the same time. So I made this decision. I was like, that's it. I'm quitting. I'm going to work. I'm going to do design. I'm going to be a freelancer. This is fabulous. And then I realized I knew nothing about business and I didn't know how to do my bookkeeping. I didn't know how to manage my business taxes. I had no idea about business systems, and it was it was a shock. And I realized that I'm like, oh my God, 90% of being a business owner is, or being like, I was like, oh, I'm going to do design all the time. I'm like, no, 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 no. This is business. This is like 90% business, 10% design. And like, you've got the design side down, but you have no idea how to manage your clients or like guide them through a good process. You don't know how to write a proper contract or, manage like setting deliverables or pricing or anything like that. So yeah, it was a big shock to my system, and it took a few years to like, and I'm still learning. I'm still figuring that stuff out right now. Like, it's a kind of continual process.
It is, and you'll find that like the business side of business, which is everything from the money to the administrative to the client interactions. It's like everything that is not you delivering your good work, that continues to grow and evolve as your business continues to grow and evolve, right? And I think a lot of people don't count on that. And that's why they get to a point where they're like, okay, I've grown enough now that I'm realizing I've hit the ceiling on my business skills, right? My ability to make this business function really well. So what did you do? Like, did you just muddle through? Did you learn?
Yeah. Definitely a lot of muddling through. I did so I think I spent about a year, sort of really poorly, stressfully, managing, like muddling through, freelancing. And then I ended up getting a job with a small apparel design company. And that was great because that took some of the financial pressure off me, but allowed me to still carry on, having freelance clients on the side. I was working full time, but then would take on these side projects. And then meanwhile, while I was doing all that, I was just like avidly consuming anything I could find on systems, how to run a business, client processes, all that sort of stuff. And then I was also using that time at the apparel company to watch how they managed their processes and how they walked their clients through it and did their revisions and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, that was about 4 years I spent doing that, before venturing out again and doing some freelance work.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you were kind of gathering the information that you needed from seeing and immersing yourself in other businesses that were doing what you ultimately wanted to be able to do.
Yeah. And I think, I think you're only as capable as you are prepared to like take action on something. It really, what you put out is all, it all comes back to like where you are at that stage of learning and that stage of change. So yeah, and I think that whole process was me just gathering more information and making myself more prepared.
And that's smart, right? That's, I think like half of what I know came from just being immersed in startups and small businesses and consulting into large organizations and just collecting as much information as I could as I went, right?
Yeah. And I think if I was to looking back, I think acknowledging that to myself, I think I went in being very much like, I'm ready, I can do this, I've got this, but and didn't give myself the permission or the time to actually recognize that no, you're a learner and it's going to take some years, and you do need to like get more information than you already have. You do need to take more time to prepare yourself. And I didn't those first few years. Like, I was really hard on myself. I was like, no, why don't you have this down? You should have this down. You need to know how to do this. But no, you don't need to know how to do it right off the bat.
You don't. You really don't.
Yeah.
And no, and you're never going to.
I'm going to, yeah. It's total fantasy to think that you would manage that.
Yeah, you just got to get out and make that make the mess and
Yeah,
adjust as you go, right?
exactly. Yeah.
So, so who do you work with? Like, who are your ideal clients?
Yeah, I love working with people, and some of my favorite clients have been people that are just really proactive in thinking about their businesses. Like they recognize, and often it's companies or people that have been in business for a while, and they're recognizing that they're hitting a certain point where either they want to grow more or they want to change. And they're not saying, oh, we need to change yesterday. It's, oh, okay, so in the next 2 years, we want to start shifting, or in the next year, I want to start shifting towards this. So they're being really proactive about sitting down and looking forward to where they're going, and recognizing that branding and like understanding their story is going to be an integral part of that shift and of that change. And so I really love working with those people, because you can sit down and you can start building that narrative of as to where they're going to go and how they're going to communicate that, and what it is that's really important in that process, and then beyond that process.
Awesome. So,
Yeah.
give me some examples of who your clients are. You don't have to name names, but
Oh,
like, are they
yeah.
big? Are they small?
Yeah. So they're medium to small. Like, so I've worked with a lot of like individuals, and then I have like health and wellness people in the health and wellness sphere. I've been working with an apparel company out of the States that is actually it's a startup of two older gentlemen doing kind of heritage ski styled ski wear, which is really fun. And I've worked with some nonprofit organizations. There's one in town that in Squamish, or actually it covered the Sea to Sky corridor. So that was an interesting process, because that covered Pemberton, Whistler, Squamish, and then a little bit of Britannia. So it was quite the spectrum of communities that they were based in. So we held workshops and branding exercises in each one of those towns. We made sure we engaged with not only their employees and staff, but also with the people that they were providing services to. And so that was, I loved that process. That was a great experience for me, because I've always been fairly shy about public speaking and, putting myself in front of a group of people. And then all of a sudden I discovered, I'm like, oh no, I love running these workshops. Like, this is brilliant. This is so much fun for me. So yeah, it's been a great experience to work, with the husband and wife team, and up to like the kind of nonprofit organization. And it's been a good spectrum.
So, what do you think you do differently? I mean, there's lots of designers out there. There are
Oh,
lots of people doing,
yeah.
creative work. What's, the people who find you, what's resonating with them?
Right. Yeah. And I'm not going to claim that I'm like, I offer the same things that many designers offer. But I think really what people connect with me is like the process that I walk them through, and that the fact that it's a conversation about where they're going and how they're growing. And uh, I'm able to bring this, I think a lot of people say this, but I really genuinely believe this is, for me, is this warmth and empathy and understanding of where they're coming from. I'm also like ridiculously enthusiastic about people. So I get so excited about where they're going. And I think those combination of things, along with this really story focused process, kind of really makes people feel comfortable in going through this process of change. And then as far as like deliverables over the years, I just got so irritated seeing work that was developed and then not used, and seeing clients feeling overwhelmed and being excited at the beginning of the process about getting a new logo or getting a new brand or a website or whatever it is. But then at the end of it being like, oh my God, I feel like this is too precious, or I feel like I don't understand it. So I've really tried to make everything that I provide my clients really understandable for them and really give them the tools and the power to take what they have and go out and use it.
Yeah, so you're giving them something back, right? They're not just getting the kind of the work product, you're giving them something that they can leverage and that almost changes their own view of their business, right?
Yeah. Oh, you said it way better than I did. But yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. Is I want them to feel completely happy and like it's a bit like I forget her name. She was the stylist you had on a few sessions ago. She was talking about how when you feel so much more confident when you're wearing the right thing, and it's that sort of feeling that I want people to get from their brand. They want to like. It doesn't need to be the latest trendy thing. It doesn't need to be super shiny. It just needs to be them, and it needs to be something that they're comfortable in and that they feel confident going out into the world and saying, this is who I am and this is what I do and this is how I do it. And so that's what I want to provide for my clients.
You're in the business of creating change.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. So what does growth mean to you? I mean, what is growth for you? Is it financial? Is it something else?
Yeah. So it's been interesting having started this business, like going from, I left a design studio and then went into this business with my friend. So it is essentially, I'm a year in and I'm looking at it. I'm like, ooh, I've totally made some of those same mistakes I've made in the past. I have a little bit of a Frankenbiz going on where I've patched things together. And I'm like, and for someone that works on story and messaging, I look at my own messaging and I'm like, ooh, there's a little bit of, disconnect there. Because of the way that the business changed. When it started, it was a partnership and now it's just myself. And I feel like I've got to still have to make that full shift into it being something that's fully mine. So I'd say that like for me, what I'm looking at in the next year is really focusing on streamlining some of those systems, getting rid of the Frankenbiz stuff that I've patched together, and just I think a lot of it is simplification and making, I try so hard and work so hard to make my clients' life easy and simple. I'd like to bring some of that into my own business for myself. And then of course there's always like the financial growth and that sort of thing. But I think that comes with the growth and the kind of cohesion with the rest of building the rest of the business that way, right?
I agree. I think that when you create a business that supports exactly who you're working with and is built to align with what you want out of it,
Mm-hmm.
the financial growth follows. It really does. And a lot of people, I think, end up running after marketing tactics and selling tactics because they think that's the problem in their business. But what
Yeah.
really the problem is that they haven't created this alignment. They haven't created the business design that they
Yeah.
really need and want and that supports them. So I've got to totally support you on that building the business that you really want is the precursor to the money, right?
Yeah. It's that whole getting out of your own way sort of thing.
Yeah. So what are you doing to find clients?
Um, I've been incredibly lucky. It's been, and this is something that I can't rely on. Well, maybe I could, but I don't necessarily think it's sustainable for the long term. But it's just a word of mouth and like client referrals has been huge, and like that just seems to keep me going. I didn't have a website. This is terrible. For the first like 6 years of being a graphic designer, I didn't have a website because it was, the shoemaker not having shoes sort of thing. And it was all referrals. And that's still been the trend is just client and word of mouth. Social media has been, I've got a few clients through that, but I honestly, when I started to use social media or Instagram for business, I got this immediate like, ooh, ick feeling. So I've been trying to work around like, well, how do I change that? How do I make this an enjoyable process or something that I want to regularly engage in that feels genuine, and provides something useful for the people viewing it. So that's something that I'm still working on, but yeah, we'll
Okay.
see. We'll see.
Yeah. Well, you know, and like this is not something I don't hear regularly. Ooh, ick, social media.
Right. Yeah.
You know, people they have their own opinions and their own thoughts on social and what it means and that sort of thing. But the way I look at it is like it's such an opportunity, right? There's so much that we can tap into. It's not a commentary on you as a person, right? It's like it's a totally valuable marketing platform that
Hmm.
helps you kind of figure out where your clients are at, what they're doing. So if we can remove the stigma associated with social media and just look at it as purely a business platform, then I think a lot of people could get a lot out of it, right?
Hmm. And I think for myself, like it was coming back to looking at, I was like, oh, I give my clients all this guidance and instruction around, tapping into being genuine in what their story is and what their background is and what it is that they want to communicate. And I'm like, I wasn't following my own advice when I first approached social media, and I was looking at it like, oh, I need to sell, I need to, communicate. Like, again, it was looking outside of myself and looking at what other people were doing and being like, oh, so that's how they're doing it, so this is how I should, versus being like, no, you've taken the time and you have taken the time to reflect, and you have these the story and these aspects of your brand that are really interesting and that you enjoy talking about. That's what you can bring, and like go back to just looking at those points, looking at those story points and saying, oh, today I'll talk about, whatever it is, this little story from my past and how it relates to something that I do now in my business, or yeah, just bringing those little more personal aspects into it. It really changed how I approached social media, made it less out there, need to keep up with keep up with whoever's, and more just here's a fun creative expression for myself.
Awesome. That's a great reframe.
Yeah.
Totally. Okay, so if you think back to kind of building this business and everything you've kind of been through, what do you think has been sort of the most pivotal moment for you?
Um, Definitely getting a business mentor has been so helpful, and that was something, if I had realized earlier on that they were going to be such a benefit, I would have done this years ago. Yeah, so I've just in the last year, I've got a business mentor, and we check in once a month, or every 2 weeks, depending on what's going on. And just having someone with more experience who has been through the same things, and can really relate. And just, again, it's like having someone outside of that like little feedback loop of one of myself to look at my business and to talk to about it has been hugely instrumental. And then I think, again, like the mental health aspect and having compassion and just recognizing that, no, you don't need to do it all at once. You can move at your own pace. You don't need to keep up, and you don't need to like, make $100,000 in 6 weeks. Like, do
What?
it, do it.
No?
Yeah. All right. Do it at a pace that's good for me. Right. Like, so those two things I think have really changed how, like, just my stress levels and my comfort around being in business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Awesome. And what do you wish other people knew? What do you wish that you knew before you started on this journey?
Oh, it's going to take time. It's all right if it takes time. Enjoy it and go slowly. I think I would have liked personally, would have been, if someone had said to me, like, you don't have to rush in and do it all at once, get a bridge job, like, take a couple of years to, like, it's going to take a couple of years to gather all that information and to gather the knowledge and the skills that you need to, like, do this well. But I also think that, like, having conversations about the fact that people are failing and running their business at the same time, I think that's often missing. Like, there's this perception, or, like, especially if you're looking on social media, that people have it dialed and that they've passed the point of making mistakes. And I think just knowing that, no, you never get past that point, and that you're always going to be making mistakes. There's always going to be failures, like, and being more accepting of that would, I think, change a lot of the internal dialogue and expectations.
I agree. And, like, I've seen enough of it over the course of how many years to know that
Yeah.
we are all in this cycle of, move really fast, slow down, move really fast, slow down. And everybody's experience is so different, right? And
Yeah.
this is part of the point of this podcast, is to bring all of this to light and help people see that there's other people out there doing exactly what they're doing. And not everybody is running around as a business celebrity. They're just real people, really building their businesses bit by bit and struggling with the same things that they're struggling with. And I wish that support was more widely available for everyone out there, because it would make entrepreneurship a whole lot more palatable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we judge ourselves, right?
Yeah. But it's, and I was thinking about this the other day, and about the kind of getting to an ability to compliment yourself, or, like, pull these little nuggets of belief about yourself out of your own work, and be like, oh, it's easy. And this has been said a million times. You see the to-do list and you see all the failures, but I think also you have to get to a stage where you can pull out and recognize, oh, I had this success. I did this. And there's these little nuggets of belief that you just start pulling out. And I think and the conversations that we have around failure and about what everybody else is doing kind of helps make you recognize areas for yourself and where you're doing well and what's going well for you, like where you're succeeding.
Yeah, I don't think we do that enough, right? We trudge along, stuck in the weeds, and we're not looking at the forest, right? And so we tend to think, oh gosh, we're failing.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, when you look back, like, I had a client on the call this morning, and she was just like, nothing's working. I'm like, is that true? I've been working with you for over a year now. Let's look at what's not working. She's like, oh, right. And so we're, like, punishing ourselves all the time, when in fact, every single thing that you do is moving you further ahead. So this judgment and this, these stories we tell ourselves, it's like a national pastime to be, really unhappy with where we're at and always want more. And it's okay to want more. That's great. I mean, that keeps you driving forward. But take a minute to look back at where you've come from. And I think every single person would.
That expectation of glamour for entrepreneurship covers up those little moments.
Yeah, I mean, that's out there, isn't it? Right? Is that one of the disconnects that we're seeing between what's supposed to be versus what we have? Because my life is not glamorous at all, but it's still pretty successful, and it's still pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, what's that big vision for you?
My big vision, it's pretty simple. And I think it's like a lot of other entrepreneurs, it's balance, and, finding that, checking the boxes of, like, doing something that's fulfilling creatively, doing something that is I feel like is contributing to the community and the world around me. That level of financial security and stability, and community and companionship. And I think they're not big, shiny, lofty, out there goals. They're pretty basic ones,
but they make you happy.
They make me really happy. Yeah.
I mean, nobody's going to turn down some more money, but still, it's like, in my experience, 95% of the people I work with, they sure they'd like some more money, but the thing that really drives them is the quality of their life, and that's going to be very different for every single person. And for some, I have one client who was like, the minute we started, she's like, I want to make $1 million this year, and I'm gonna go and I'm gonna do it. Whereas a lot of my clients are like, look, yeah, okay, so I have a financial goal, but really what I need is the work schedule to be able to accommodate my chronic health issues, or to be able to carve away time to be with my kids, or to never have to work on a project that doesn't mean anything again. Like this, these are the things that really, truly keep us happy.
Yeah. Those are the core, like, fulfilling moments that you kind of go through life being like, oh, this is what I'm after.
Yeah. It's very rarely about the money.
Yeah.
Now, we don't want to be homeless, but
we all need to eat, and it's not. I've been on the freelance roller coaster ride, and it's not fun. That's it's stressful, and
sure is.
Rice get really unappetizing after a few months, so let's not go back there. But
for sure, I mean, we really want to find that right balance, right?
Yeah.
So what's next for you? Where are you headed?
So I am looking at just, like I was saying, just simplifying some things in my business. But I also want to start working. I'm still doing web projects, and I'm still doing a few types of projects that aren't sort of the light me up and get me really excited about life things. So I want to start phasing those out slowly and focusing more on the really exciting things for me, which is the branding, and just really pouring my time and attention into that. And then strangely, I've started a gin business outside. I know this is a total left fielder. So I've started another business. So I'll be running that in conjunction. I have a partner out in Toronto. So we're working on getting our first batch of gin production samples done by the end of the month, and have a meeting with the liquor board out there and stuff like that. So I'll be doing creative direction and branding and marketing and stuff as well for that. So I'm looking at being really selective with Back 40 and just taking on a handful of, clients that I really love, and focus on doing branding for them. And then I'm going to be running this gin business as well.
Why did I not know this? Party at your house next.
Right? Yeah. When the samples come in.
Well, that's a whole other conversation. And I think it's fascinating that, and I love this multidisciplinary interest, because I think we're all there, right? We all have these wide and varied interests, and good on you for pursuing that and building that out. And gin, yes, I am in support of that business altogether.
Excellent. I like good client feedback, or good feedback like that,
Awesome.
Always looking for validation.
So we're running up on time, and I wanted to thank you for spending time with me today. I always love hearing kind of where you're at, and where you're very thoughtful and intentional about everything that you do. And I think that's a real gift. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so they can find me at back40studio.com. And you want to write out 40, it's not 40, or at Back40 Studio on Instagram as well.
Awesome. Awesome. And we'll make sure that we get those into the show notes, and that people have an opportunity to go check it out. And thank you again for spending the time with me today. Always love hearing from you. And I think, like, everything that you've talked about bringing some of this intentionality and some of this of you into your business is such an important message for everybody in your, how you've created this creative process for yourself too. I think this is something that people really want to hear about. So I would encourage you to write a little bit more about that and make it available to people, because I think that there are a lot of creatives who need that kind of guidance.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you. And thanks for having me. I always love chatting with you. You always have some great insights, and you're so easy to speak with.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a wrap for this episode. Such an amazing conversation. Make sure you go and check out Robin and her amazing work. And thank you for tuning in today to hear this story. The episodes that you're listening to are all featuring members of my free private Facebook group called The Real Deal Business Coaching Group, where we have daily prompts to keep you focused on building your business and sharing your everyday challenges, bi-weekly virtual coffee chats, open coaching, and member support from this incredible community. If you'd like to join our community, if you'd like to be featured on this show, I'd love for you to come and hang out with us in the group. The link's in the show notes, or search us up, Real Deal Business Coaching in Facebook, to find us. And finally, I would love for you to join us for our next episode, where we're going to be speaking to Megan Williamson, who is a Pinterest marketing consultant that works with businesses to maximize their presence, increase their traffic, and in turn make more sales, get more clients with Pinterest. And she is amazing. She's a fellow Canadian, and she has built a super interesting business that is addressing some of the problems that we have with utilizing platforms. So thank you for being here. And if you've enjoyed today's content, I would love for you to give us a review on whatever platform you're on. This helps us share these stories with an even bigger audience. And until next time, keep building, keep dreaming, and keep being real.